Hello, everybody, and welcome to Fridays at. I'm Karen Taylor of the Color Vowel Chart. So glad to have you here today. It's been a while since we've had a Fridays at gathering. This is an occasional gathering that we have among color vowel lists, whoever, all the people that comprises. This is a regular kind of event where we come together and talk about a particular feature or a particular application of the color vowel approach or the color vowel chart. So we're really glad today to have Jennifer Verbakel with us. Hi, Jennifer. Greetings. Jennifer is the senior speech language professional at the National Technical Institute for the Deaf. I believe that's part of the Rochester Institute of Technology, correct? Okay. Where she works with deaf and hard of hearing students who are intent on either learning speech or improving their speech in spoken English. Okay. What I personally find fascinating about that is that comprises a really large group, doesn't it, Jennifer? And if you want, you can open mic.
It
Can you
does,
just give
yeah.
us a landscape before you start of what, I mean, gosh, folks who have grown up deaf are, if I understand correctly, they're learning spoken English as a completely different system, possibly from
Yeah,
the signed system that they know.
right. Um,
Yeah,
if
go
there's
ahead.
if there's multiple modalities to access spoken English, of course. And some students grow up in a listening environment where they have hearing aids or cochlear implants. They're listening and then they're encouraged to speak. Some students that we have never spoken in their lives, and they may or may not have any technology hearing devices. So I will show one of my, if it's okay, I'll just show a quick um, slide.
Yeah. And as I finish off just introducing you, what's been so exciting is that Jennifer and I have known each other, at least in passing through emails for, gosh, I want to say like over 10 years now.
I think so, yeah.
And we've never, until last month when we met, we hadn't had a chance to really talk. And
Hmm.
so today's really special for me because we get to get a glimpse of what, I don't know if you can put it this way. The chart has been around a long time. A lot of people know the chart who I've not met. And Jennifer, in some ways, you represent that kind of person that we've not really talked. And I'm fascinated to know what you've done with the chart. You've taken it and you've run with it in your particular niche of your profession. And so I'm ready to be delighted and surprised and curious and things that I've never thought about, I'm sure are going to come up. And
Wonderful. And as we
yeah.
have talked, it's probably I had purchased the materials, I'd watched videos that were available, but we didn't, there's just never had a chance to do the training together. And so there might be things within this approach that I've overlooked for people who are well versed in color vowel. So,
Well, and that said, you're going to have insights and applications that very likely we've not thought of. So I think it's just a winning combination to come together like this. I'd like to
perfect.
welcome some of our viewers here in the room, just so you know who they are. Hi, Gemma. Good to see you. Gemma's calling in. Gemma, you want to introduce yourself briefly?
Yes, I'm one of the Color Vowel Level 3 trainers, and I'm calling in from sunny Scotland for a change.
Ah, okay. Wonderful. And I want to say hi to Anne Come. She's in the room. I'll go ahead and speak for you, Anne, if I know you're a little, you've got some things going on there in the classrooms. But she's calling in from Norfolk, Virginia, when she's also a level 3 trainee. So we're talking about folks that are getting ready to train for us. And Dr. Robin Barr, you want to briefly introduce yourself?
Oh, what do I call myself? Linguist in residence, right? I was teaching at American University until I retired last year, and I've also been consultant for the Color Vowel Chart, keeping you phonologically honest. Is that how we're putting it?
Responsible.
Responsible? Yes, in the development of the chart.
That's
So
right.
That's great.
Wonderful. Yeah,
That's
so
great.
Jennifer, please feel free to take it away. Tell us what you do and how you do it.
So yeah, let me show you the oh actually, yeah, I'll show you the first slide and let me click click on slideshow. So these, this is just a little overview of our NTID students. So on the left, you see listening technology. We have students who have no technology, a little bit over a quarter percent or 25%, and about 34% have hearing aids. This is from the most recent incoming freshmen. 34% or so have hearing aids. Yes.
What is NTID?
Oh, yes, sorry. Yeah, the National Technical Institute for the Deaf. We're in Rochester, New York, and we're a college of Rochester Institute of Technology, as Karen had mentioned.
Beautiful. Thank
So,
you.
mhm. And
Okay.
then we have 27% using cochlear implants. So cochlear implants is when you have the processor that attaches to the side of the ear, and then the I'm going to get all my words wrong. There's electrical connectivity in the brain and connected to the cochlea or sensory neural component, and then it bypasses any problems that you might have otherwise. So the hearing aids are just what you put over your ears. The cochlear implant attaches. Some students have both a hearing aid and a cochlear implant. And then interestingly, when it comes to communication modes, we have spoken language about 25%, spoken and sign language about 30%, use of American Sign Language about 38%, and other about 7%. And that might be like people are writing, they might not have familiarity with English, very, very much, like they might be from another country, for example, or they might have an international sign language. So,
So in other words, they're learning American Sign Language as a second language. If
mhm,
from our world of second and foreign languages, they're learning a second signed language, and they're learning separately from that the grammar of spoken written English
right,
for the purpose of reading, and they're learning the speech of that possibly all right. Gemma's
right.
nodding her head. I mean, it's amazing to think
Yeah,
about how many different complementary but distinct systems they're grappling with. Is
right.
that accurate?
Absolutely. And what's interesting about our services is some students, they had experiences growing up in elementary, grammar, high school, or whatever, having had speech language services. And when they focus, sometimes it's focused on vocabulary, sometimes it's focused on like written English, language features. Sometimes it's spoken on speech, but not always. And when they're coming to us, it's more of an adult model where if they are interested, they can sign up. And if they want to focus on a certain goal, then we support them in that goal. So it's a very different experience than when they were younger. And that's why
Mhm.
some of my students will come in to see me and they're just curious. They've never had any experience with speaking in their lives and they're just curious about it. And so it's very interesting to see like the phonological awareness develop. Even if they're not hearing it, they're getting a sense, like an internal sense of what's happening for the vowels and the consonants. So,
Oh, I have all kinds of, I'm trying to write down questions. So
okay.
I'm interrupting. So very exciting. Folks, we can also use the chat just to post questions. And I've told Jennifer that we'll kind of keep them over there as a holding place. And so don't be afraid of putting something in the chat. Okay. Wonderful.
So, one of the things that Karen and I had talked about is something really important to me is how do we make that speech accessible to someone who's never spoken or heard speech before? And we know that there's an auditory feedback loop, but some people are not using hearing aids or they have limited hearing or they're not using cochlear implants. So that really limits the ability to match what they've said to what they've heard. So for hearing native speakers, we're matching with what we've heard our whole lives, or we're matching with an approximation of that, like or if like something that's familiar to that we can relate to. So a lot of times what I'm looking for with my students is kinesthetic feedback and other forms of feedback such as spectrograms, such as Google Chrome Music Lab or the Visi Pitch that Robin, you were going to talk about later. And what I really appreciate is the Color Vowel Chart gives us a shared tool to communicate with them. And let me see. So one of my favorite signs in American Sign Language, and I didn't find this out until like many years later, is this. And it's like, I guess I interpret it as being in sync with the other person. And so one of the reasons I use the color vowel chart is because it gives us a shared understanding, like a foundation. So it's a shared way of communicating about the vowels, and it kind of keeps us in sync. Um, I'm often using it for students who are new to speaking. Sometimes for students who have struggled to hear or produce targeted sounds in their previous experiences, but a lot of times I'm using it as a full complement to supporting a student just starting out. It provides that foundation point that we can always go back to. And I will use written versions, like spelled pronunciation, but I have my own style. And of course, IPA would be too hard for my students, I think. Like it would just add to the workload, you know? So I use my own style to support them of the spelled pronunciation and the color vowel chart as well.
Mm.
Let's see. So in terms of how I first start, especially with a student who is totally unfamiliar with speaking, I check for stimulability. And that's an indication that the student can produce the sound already or has a close approximation of it. And so I often with the color vowel words, I will go through and I'll say, okay, I'll sign green, and they'll tell me, I'll see if they can say green, for example, or gray, or silver, red, black. I will ask them if they can say that and just jot a little note down to see where they're close.
Yeah.
Yeah, and did you want to do
Yeah,
that?
fascinating question. I remember we talked about this in
You
Robin's
did.
class. So we have the word. Can you show us again, green, the sign?
Green. I do this.
Okay.
I have been thinking like my one student who I used it quite frequently with this semester or throughout the past year and a half, I think. He's pretty like he attaches it very closely and he'll be like, "Oh, is that blue? Is that green?" So you could do an E, like a moving E as well. I tend to do this for now. So I can go through all the colors if you'd like.
Yeah, we'd love to do it.
Okay.
I love it. And I think I'm curious. I have a feeling that if we went with the vowel symbols, we might run out of distinct. I'm curious about that.
So I wouldn't do
Yeah.
it for all of them for
Okay.
the vowels themselves, like the fingerspelled version. But what
Okay.
because we would run out, like there'd be overlap and
Like the same problem that we
yeah,
have with written letters in English.
right.
Right,
Yep.
right. Oh,
Yep.
please teach us. We'd love to know the green, blue, red stuff.
Okay. So I'll go through that and then I'll switch it to what else I want to talk about. But so green,
Green. So
silver,
can we hold on? We want to
yep,
try. And
green. So it's a shaking your G. Sorry, this is a G.
okay.
And it's just shaking it.
Okay.
Yeah. And
Great.
then silver, my best sign for that is starting at your ear and coming down to an S. Silver, silver. And then gray is like this, gray. Red is like red lipstick, red. Black is like your pointer finger and across the forehead. Purple is a P, looks like this, shaking. And there's no sign for mustard. So I kind of assign it a sign. And so I'll tell the students this, and this is an M. And so something like this for mustard. I haven't come up with anything else. Maybe I could do cup, or the other one I was thinking of is if I do this, because it shows the drop of the jaw,
Yeah.
So we'll
It could
see.
be a combination then of color, signs, and letter kind
True.
of references. Okay.
Yeah. For olive sock, it's really awkward to spell. It's fine to spell olive, but it's really awkward. It's not like a one-on-one connection. So what I end up doing is I say, when you go to the doctor and they have that wood depressor and they put it in your mouth and say ah. So we do doctor ah. So like this. So that's the attachment there. For white, it's white, like this, which is also nice because it does show the movement to the
Yeah.
diphthong component.
Oh, that's nice.
Yep.
No.
And blue would be a B turning side to side. And then wood is this, like you're chopping wood. And then for rows, I have two of them. I do either rows or O. So you're showing the lip movement O. Mm-hmm. I'm on the old school version, so I don't have orange. For turquoise, I do oi. So boy, oi. And for auburn, I liken it to looking at a baby and how cute the baby is. So you sign baby, ah, ah. And then brown, I do two. I do either brown or ow, ow, or ow. And this is just like hurting, ow. Yep. And then what I will often do to start them out is I'll write on the board or on our piece of paper or something, or even on like the screen. I'll have GREEN when we're first starting, and I'll cross out the G, cross out the R, cross out the N, and then I'll be like, that's what's left, so that they can make that attachment. So
So the word, when you're using the word attachment,
mhm.
I'm hearing almost like
Connection.
when I
Yeah.
talk, okay, like a connection, but also sometimes it's almost a physical connection, an
Yeah.
attachment.
Right.
Okay, but also kind of association. Is that
Yes. Yeah, probably a
okay?
better word. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Yeah. I typically, so I'll go through and I'll check for stimulability for all of those different productions. And sometimes it's the vowel, oh, sorry, sometimes it's the color, and sometimes it's just me describing it like, ah, like how would you say that? Just to make sure that I can catch what's there. And then with that, knowing what they already have in their repertoire or their approximation capabilities, then I can be like, okay, then we can move from there into other domains, other either diphthongs or other vowels. I often start with visemes, the a, u, e. So a viseme is like we have the phonemes, which are the sounds or the representation of the sounds. The viseme is what you see on the mouth. And so I'll start, and I often, like when I'm going through some of the things, I will look, to the side and have them see how my jaw is moving. So ah, ooh, e, they're all different on the mouth, on the lips and everything. So I'll start with that, especially for those new speakers. Um, Let me see here. I showed you my signs, and that this is something that I use. I created it. Let me describe it a little bit first. Um, it is overwhelming for my students, and it might be overwhelming for you when you see it. But we focus on like one little quadrant, and it was the best I could do on a large piece of paper. It's my color vowel organizer for them, and it has about 200 of the most common or high frequency words. And what I'll do, let me show you. Share slideshow. There we go. Okay. So for example, what I'll do is I'll start with green tea, and we'll pick that a, u, e. So I'll start with green tea. I'll turn my head to the side and I'll read all of them, and they can just watch. And that's just their initial exposure. So that way I'm not asking them to say it right away, but I'm giving them that visual model. And then I'll do blue moon or olive sock, and we'll kind of piecemeal it so that way it's not too much. And over time, you can see here, first of all, I tend to put the diphthong information on there, the gliding information, and then yeah, over time I'll have them decide what they want to do, or they'll say some of the words. And if as they get more skilled, they can make up a short phrase or a short sentence based on all of these words. And I try to encourage them to point to it, but sometimes I don't know if they just don't feel comfortable or, something along those lines, but I end up pointing and I'm like modeling at least. So,
So they learn by watching you. I'm going to use a word that the folks in the room will recognize, by watching you flood all of the words in one category.
yes. Yeah.
So, folks, I think this is so interesting because, and I apologize for interjecting,
You're fine.
but it's so exciting because the flooding still works. It's just visual and possibly oral to some extent, but it's
Mhm.
visual where they're catching that one position in every one of those words. And
Right.
that's the corollary to a hearing learner that we work with who would hear E in every word, me, she, he,
Mhm.
people, keep, but they would see it instead.
Yeah, so it's they might not be hearing it right because they don't have hearing aids or cochlear implants, but they would see it and they would see that jaw movement. And then sometimes some of my students have just started using hearing aids again or cochlear implants, and so they are getting some of that feedback. If you were looking for lists along this line, you could also find auditory bombardment lists. And that's what we have. We typically use those for children with phonological processing disorders. And so it might be all, um, all E words, for example, and what you can overexpose to them. So that way they're hearing it and trying to match up um, to their own productions.
Wow, that's a neat phrase, auditory bombardment.
Hmm. Yep. So there was something interesting I came across a couple of years back. It's called the jingle jangle fallacy or something like that. Have you heard of it?
No, tell us more.
It's that people, I think if I understand it correctly, it's like people in different disciplines, they just have different words for the same thing.
Yes.
Know? And so sometimes it's nice to know the other discipline so that way you could be like, oh, okay, so I can find more resources using that title or more resources using this other title and just know that it's a shared lingo or whatever. So
You called it the fallacy, the jingle jangle fallacy?
jingle jangle fallacy, yeah. Yeah.
I just love, I've sensed that from the start of our conversations, Jennifer, um, that we have these parallel concepts, but with different terminology. And that's what I'm doing a bit of in the chat, by the way. Things like stimulability that's a word that I watched Robin's face 3 times when you said it. She's like, what is that? What is that? It's a fascinating concept. Just to have a different word for something by itself is great. So I'm putting that in there.
Awesome.
Wonderful. A question that just came up. Are your sessions mostly one-on-one, or are they one on small, or do you ever work with
Right.
groups?
Typically they're one-on-one. They I treat them as, confidential times where the student is coming in and they're trying something new. If they would want to do a group session, I guess I've never offered that, but I feel like I want to respect that this might be a new experience for them. There might be lack of confidence, they might have had a poor experience in the years past. So I just want to make sure that attention is all focused on them. And typically our sessions are set up such as they're one-on-one either once a week for 50 minutes or twice a week for 50 minutes.
Okay, great.
So yeah, that's what I've included here. I included the AEIOU and the numbers and then some common words. I think I want to update this. I was telling Karen the other day, I hope to update it because certain words like app, for example, or other relevant words for today's times could be put in here. So
Right.
let me see. Oh, I'm gonna pause sharing just so I can find the next thing. Oh yeah, I know what it is. Hang on. Okay. So did you have any other questions about how I incorporate the color vowel chart?
Well, all of it. We want to know more.
So,
So let me ask, I mean, does it,
yeah,
by having, remind me, green?
green, yep,
Okay, I always see some other angle, so I'm fascinated. Green.
yep.
So, okay. Do you find, so what we find on our side is, when teachers are doubtful, that new teachers are doubtful that students will that'll be too hard for them or something like that, they quickly find that learners actually adopt and adapt to this, to the color file references really quickly because they fill a gap. Do you find the same with your learners, that they're quickly referring to target sounds in the symbols that you've used?
The one student who I've used it with exclusive, like, quite a bit, he will, it's so fun to watch him because he'll be reading something and he'll be analyzing in his head and say, like doing, blue or green or, a sign. And then he'll look at me and I'll say, oh yeah, it's that one. So he's made that correspondence. Every student that I've used Color Vowel with has had a different approach. So this student in particular has had that direct, like, making that correspondence with what he's reading.
Mhm. And then I wanted to remind us of, there was one sign that really mirrored the movement very well. Was it brown?
So this is ow or ow. That's what
Okay.
I do. So it could be, anything. Sorry, not that. It's me
What
talking
was
with
the
my
one that
hands.
came from the chest? Was that
I,
white?
I.
I,
Yep. So you
I,
start with an open 5 hand and it comes and closes. I.
right.
Now, something that's interesting, and I know this is kind of an aside, but something that your color vowel lists might be interested in looking up would be cued speech. And that is it is not a language, it is a tool. So the cued speech supports the visemes and supports phonemes. So for example, I'm going to give you a test right now.
Okay.
And
One second. Visemes. There's another good word. Tell
yes,
us what viseme is, just because it's good. We're gonna love it.
yep. So it is the visual representation of the phoneme on your lips.
Love it. I love
So
it. Thank you. There we
I'm
go,
gonna,
Robin.
I'm going to give you a test right now, and hopefully you'll pass very quickly. So if I show you, yes, cued speech being a language, not a language, but rather a tool. So if I show you, this is the M sound, right? And this is the B sound. And I'm going to show you a CVC. When I come forward, it will say ah. So I'm going to show you something right now. What did I say? So this is M, this is B. What did I say? Do you know?
Mob.
Bob.
Bob. Yeah. So it
Bob.
started with B and it ended with B. Bob.
Oh,
So sorry, it's a whole system unto itself. But
yeah.
and then if I did this, mom, mom. If you wanted to do mob, it would look like this, mob. But as we know, the MBP all looks the same on the lips. So this, for some students growing up, this helps to support recognition of like speech reading, that kind of thing. So, and that's called cued speech. It's like, it's hard. It's one of those things that you don't get it until you get it, and you're like, oh my gosh, that makes perfect sense. And sometimes it's hard for our students to recognize like what it corresponds to, but it can support speech reading.
So who uses it? Is it this, for example, the hearing person who has been trained in cued speech
Right.
to support?
hmm So I've been to a cued speech summer camp a couple of times, and in those situations, we'll have some speech language pathologists who are supporting students, some teachers of the deaf, but primarily it's parents learning how to communicate with their deaf children. And because you're learning the phonemes, you're helping to support those phonemes. Sometimes there's a direct correlation with supporting them with reading as well.
Can you talk just briefly about reading? I do recall, and it's stuck with me all these years. I want to say in about 2005, I went to a presentation by somebody from Gallaudet, a hearing person who was teaching reading to students at Gallaudet University, which is, I think, the world's first deaf university.
Mhm.
Maybe still the only, I don't know.
So that's a standalone university. Yep, and ours is a college of RIT.
All right.
Yeah.
So Gallaudet, and what stuck with me was the real challenge of reading without the oral experience
Mhm.
to support it, and without the oral vocabulary to support it. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. So I think it's always an interesting scenario where you don't have that auditory feedback loop growing up, so you're not overhearing, you're not being exposed to things consistently or on a regular basis or whatever. Um, and then you're trying to read and you're trying to match up maybe what you don't have as experience to what the words are in front of you. Some students will excel if they have a full language model. So if they have full ASL and then they can put in written English and overlay that, like compare them, be able to compare them. So it's really helpful for some of our deaf students if you have a full language model um, to be able to develop those written and writing and reading English skills.
Full language model, would that be somebody who is completely proficient in one system?
Right. One language. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so what is the opposite of a full language, is somebody who doesn't have a full language model?
So there's a lot of talk right now in the deaf community and people who support the deaf community of language deprivation. And that's where some of the children, they might not have had full access to English or full access to ASL. And so as they're growing up, there's some struggles with accessing the meanings or being able to express themselves.
Okay.
And some of our students, like we support our students in whatever they prefer to be supported as. So like if they come in and they're signing exclusively, I will try to support them in sign. If they're coming in and signing and speaking at the same time, I'll support them in that way. If they're speaking only, I'll support them in that way. But that being said, signing and speaking isn't a full language model, but it's what I can use to communicate with them the best because that's their preference.
Is signing and speaking, is that signed English? I mean, otherwise, how do
Yeah.
you do that at the same time?
Right. So
Yeah.
what happens is it tends to be led by your English and your signs follow. Yeah.
Signed English isn't actually
Right.
a full language. It's
Right.
not like ASL.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so tangential question. So when somebody is interpreting oral speech into sign language, are
Mhm.
they signing in signed English or are they signing in ASL
I think
typically?
typically they would be signing in ASL. That being said, if they know their client and their client has, for example, it tends to be speaking primarily, but using sign to support, maybe they'll shift. Not being an interpreter, I can't speak to that exactly, but I feel like I have heard people will adapt depending on what the client needs
Okay, that's fascinating. Okay, so you said you're using Color Vowel with one student right
at
now.
the moment. Yeah.
And so do you choose that based on, you see it's a good fit and so you bring it in? And what is your decision tree like when you decide who not to use it with?
Um, a lot of my students this past year have wanted to focus on different things. For example, maybe having conversation or improving their vocabulary or written English, you know? And so he was one of the students in particular who wanted to focus on his foundational speech skills. And so because I know that this is a tool that can get me towards that shared conception of vowels, I know that I can bring that into play.
Mhm.
So,
So you work with all kinds of folks who want all kinds of things, but when it comes to speech, that's when you pull out Color Vowel.
right. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. I had a question about assonance. Can you show us your chart again with all the words in it?
Yeah.
So when I think about, um, when I look at all those kinds of words, I think about poetry or spoken word poetry and how um, a lot of poetry or just speech that's pleasant to listen to includes assonance, repeated vowel sounds that we sort of in advance choose. We have our words, we choose our words based on how the music's going to sound. And I'm curious, this is neat, by the way. I'm going to finish my question in a minute because I want to stop and look at this with everybody. Folks in the room, what do you see? What's curious? I mean, let's look at this.
Look at the arrows. That's what was
Yeah.
making me excited. The arrows pointing to the color that the movement goes towards. So I don't see anything for blue or green. I guess you're not thinking of those as moving vowels, but definitely gray and rose, brown, turquoise, and white are the moving vowels you're putting in this chart.
Yeah,
And
I did add the light green, or sorry, the darker green up here and the darker blue up here. I wouldn't know how to do that. I often don't think of those as moving vowels for me, so it was an interesting conversation when Karen and I were talking the other day, and discussing them as moving vowels. I often think of them as static, not dynamic. So
well, they're such little movers in a way.
yeah.
Wow. So I'd be curious about those. I will get back to the second part of my question in a moment, but my question right now has to do with, again, with the signs that you use for each vowel sound. And have you thought about, I mean, do all of the moving sounds here, the ones that have an arrow to green or an arrow to blue, um, do those signs move? And do the non-moving signs not move? Have you thought about making those, since you've expressed an openness to, trying to decide what to do, is that something
Right.
in mind possibly?
I'd have to think about that, like how to make that connection for my students. Um, and also because it's integrated in me now too. Do you know what I mean? Like I have my own attachment to it in the way that I tend to do it. So it's forces me to make a change when I'm thinking,
Right.
like, instead of doing you know. Hang on one second. One
Yeah,
second.
a non-moving sound, and yet you get to that sound by dropping the jaw a little bit.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So there is something else called visual phonics, and I have never used that before, but I have heard people have success with it. I don't know if it's like it attaches some of the ASL to some movement or something like that. I'm probably going to mess this up, but something like or something like that for the M sound. So there's the M sign for it, and other things. But I've never been trained, so I don't really know that for sure.
Yeah.
So
Other questions? What are you thinking? Hi,
I
Gemma.
have a question. Um, Jennifer, I was wondering, have you, just in your experience, have you noticed that the students that you're working with this method, are there any particular sounds that they struggle with more? And I'm just kind of linking back to, experience in, teaching the chart with hearing students
yeah.
who we often notice they have the same issues with certain sounds. Is that also the same with a non-hearing student?
Yeah, it, quite a few of them they would have struggles with for different reasons, I think. So for example, that R is always, it can be a challenge for so many people anyways, even through development. So can be challenging. Um, it's interesting, and wooden hook and a cup of mustard are pretty clear. Green tea is sometimes challenging for the placement of the tongue. Um, I can often get that with because of the visual of the side view. There's a better visual for that. Oi is often difficult, but I often don't worry about it as much because it's so rare. Um, and let's see. I have to provide reminders for oo and o to include the lip movement, and then for ow, that I think ow, because it is such a dynamic movement, they can get that pretty quickly. Um, ah can sometimes be difficult, but again, I offer that side view. And I offer the side view. For A, that sometimes is challenging because of the E component and not having familiarity with having to slide into another vowel.
This is so
It's pretty
interesting.
easy.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
No, sorry. Gemma, did you have more to say for us?
No, thank you for the explanation. It's so, so fascinating. I wondered, where are your learners from? What are their mother tongues? Just out of interest. Am I reading your mind, Karen?
Right. So the one student I'm working with right now is from Ohio. I've had students from all over the United States, some from different countries as well, but I'm trying to remember. Yeah, like some of them have been also adopted but American, like, and so typically I'm seeing students from various states throughout the country.
So they would be in English L1 communities, families, that kind of environment,
Yes,
typically.
you would hope that they would have been exposed. I don't know what their family dynamics are always like,
Sure.
Sometimes it's a situation where um maybe sign is the best way of communicating, but maybe the family doesn't know sign, and so you're sitting at a Thanksgiving table and they're missing out on a lot of that information in certain cases, and in some cases there's full exposure.
Yeah,
So,
thanks.
yeah.
I'm thinking about phonemic awareness for reading, because if you're uh, if you're a native sign ASL user, then you're not going to have any of the connections with the English sounds for particular words. Are you more likely to get students using a whole word method of like Chinese or something, recognizing a word by just its meaning rather than trying to break it down into its pronunciation?
I think often, yes. And sometimes you'll find that some students will finger spell a word, and or they'll see somebody finger spell a word and they'll make the assumption that they know what that word is, but they haven't caught the last part. They've only caught the beginning,
Mm.
and it could be a multisyllabic word, and it's hard to know what that means without knowing what the ending is.
Because
Um,
I run into that with my dyslexic students, and I was wondering if that was a similar issue.
Yeah, I do think it tends to be whole word, and which is just a lot cognitively, executive function wise, etc.
What about lip reading? Do you find that have you thought about using the vowel chart with? I mean, I know you use cued speech with with lip reading. Is that
So yeah, I
how
have
that
tried.
operates?
Yeah, I've tried lip reading with my students. What's difficult about lip reading is that it's not all there's so much that happens behind the lips.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it can be very difficult for them to identify that. And especially if you don't have that like being growing up and having that overt exposure, then that can be really challenging to identify what somebody is saying.
I know when you were talking about is it visemes,
I say visemes, but maybe I'm
visemes.
mistaken.
The first thing that occurred to me is that you don't have access to what the tongue is doing. I mean, you've got the lips and you've got the jaw, but you don't have the front and back of the
Right,
tongue, or the movement of the tongue. Have
right.
you used like tongue depressors or lollipops or toothbrushes or anything like that to help students figure out what their tongues are doing, or how do you do that?
Yeah, so um I end up like I'll use my hands first of all. So like this would be just at rest or something, and this would be the L sound. So like if these are your teeth and then this is the tongue coming up for L, la la la, or da da da. Um and I will show like that. I think Rachel's English on YouTube, she has some nice ways of showing like the R, I think, or something like that. She has some nice visual movements. I also show palletograms. I don't
Mm,
know. Do you all know what those are? Yeah?
nope.
No? Okay. Let me
Yeah.
open this up. So I'd show these. Is there a way to make it bigger? Hang on. So this is where I would start with. And this, I don't even remember who like, I created this myself. And so it's based on my own articulation. And then I'm talking to people and I'm like, oh, you say that in a different, like, and we analyze where their tongue is touching. And I'm like, oh, you say that in a different way than I do. And it's totally within, average limits or
I'm
whatever.
not seeing your palletograms on your
Oh,
shared.
thank you. It's because Zoom doesn't share. Yeah, hang on one second. Hang on. Okay. Thank you for letting me know. Okay, so this would be just the initial just to orientation picture. And then I would show the k, g. I kept it with stops, but you could do k, g, with this
Mhm.
one, of course. Um, and t, d. I want to improve these. They're not perfect, but that's okay. Um, the N phoneme, um, s, z, sh, zh. And I think that might be it for now. I do also when
Did you create these yourself, or is there a collection?
I created them myself.
Awesome.
There is a what is it? Oh gosh, electropalatogram. And it's something that you can put into your mouth. And when you put it in your mouth, the contact points between the tongue and um, the palate, the upper palate, um, will show up on the screen. So you can kind of in real time figure out where you're touching for those.
Right. Those are much harder to read than your diagrams, though, I find.
They're hard to read and they're expensive. So
Hmm.
the other
Gee, I want one.
Well, it won't help you with the vowels because nothing's touching. That's the whole
I
problem.
like it's expensive. It's hard to read. Let's
I
get one.
know. Yeah.
Something
Oh
we
yeah.
haven't,
And
yeah, something we
ultrasound.
haven't talked about is vowel yoga. And I don't know if
Yeah.
Anne's been thinking about, or Jem or Robin, but I think about, I don't know how if it would work as well, but the idea of exploring the continuum of vowel production to support, then I think of this as sort of the digital, right? The hitting the right place and the right movement versus the analog.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Have you
After
thought about that kind of movement to find black and to find blue as sort of anchor positions?
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing those videos the other day, and I will use them when I go back in the fall.
Great.
So, and I'll rewatch them for refreshers.
Yeah.
I mean,
So,
We
it
have
occurs
whole
to me
courses on it too.
uh,
But
that you
Robin?
could even when you do the vowel yoga, you could use the hand sign, when you are
Right.
up with green and
true.
over with blue, and you there might be a way to incorporate the sign, well, not some of the signs, but some, maybe some of the
Right.
letter signs
That's a
in
good
with your
idea.
vowel yoga, just to uh be more iconic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I haven't used the Vowel Yoga version, but I we've pulled out the Linda Mood, some of those resources before. But I would like to use the Vowel Yoga because I would like to see how my student responds in particular. So and if I have other students as well.
Yeah, the Linda Mood materials are similar in that they chart the space of the mouth. So that'll be an interesting stretch. My other question is, you innovated these paletograms. Um, do you share what you're doing with colleagues? Do you have a community of colleagues that you
I will offer them like especially to our interns, but everybody has their own resources, and sometimes our students aren't working on speech, like their students aren't working on speech, so then they don't need that as a resource per se.
Mhm.
The other thing I do as well for um for productions, I call them productions with my students because you can say phonemes, but that's a little bit much. You can say sounds, but they might not be hearing it, you know? So I call them productions because it requires a movement. And what I also do as well, I have a model of teeth from my dentist. I don't even know whose they were. And one of one of the teeth in the back is missing. But you know, that's fine. And I say, I hope you're not too grossed out. But I bring it out along with Play-Doh, and then we'll try to kind of model how the tongue is you know, for that 3D um multimodal kind of effort. So
I've seen that done with a, you know, well, a model jaw, and you put your hand in to pretend it's
yeah,
the tongue too.
yeah. This one was a little more homemade than that. Charcoal to create. Oh, cool. What I've told, so I'd be curious how you did that. What I've told my students for palletograms is like if you have construction paper and if you get construction paper wet, it's going to have a darkened spot. So that's like putting a, you know, that construction paper in your mouth, and where the tongue touches is the dark spot where it gets wet. But that's cool about the charcoal.
Oh, it's messy, but I mean, it felt messy at the time. Maybe if there was, you know, we were not having as much fun with it. But yeah, you can like brush your tongue with like charcoal and do something similar. And there's a lot of linguistic field work when you go abroad and you can't take like a lot of technology
Mhm.
into different areas. Some of them use that type of palatography.
Very cool. Yeah. There was one activity, I know we're talking about color vowel, but Karen said it would might be okay to share something else
Yeah.
that I do.
Yeah, we
Um,
have a few more minutes. Let's do it.
okay. Let me open up to the right slide. And let's see. Okay. So this is something that I put together, and it's more of an inductive lesson. And it's interesting when I do, oh, I can't do it this way. I have to do it this way. Hang on. Okay, so when I do this with my students, it's really interesting for me and for them, I think, because I'm asking them to basically put a structure together without knowing where everything goes right away. And sometimes they already have exposure to certain productions. So I call this like a consonant hamburger, because when it's all together, it kind of looks like a hamburger. So we have this to start with, we have the stop sounds, stop productions, and we have continuous productions with air going through the nose or air going through the mouth. And then we have both, which is the combination of the stop and the mouth. So Karen, I would say, where does that go?
Continuous
Okay. Through the nose or the mouth?
through the mouth.
Okay. So I'm going to put that here, and I would either do, hang on, let me make this darker so it stands out better. I would either do this, or if I really want to reinforce that it has length to it, I would do this.
Okay.
And who's the voiced partner for s?
Z.
Z. Yeah.
And maybe I would underline or bold that. I think I tend to bold it.
Mhm.
So, okay. Now,
Then for ch, would that be both stop and continuous? Is that how
yeah,
you would do that? Okay.
yep. So then I would go down here. Hang on. Oh, where to go? And I would go something like that.
Yeah.
And then what I end up doing is I go through that whole the description with the students. And for example, I would say, so if you had where would that go? You know, and then they would tell me through the nose. So I would put that here, and I might do either 1 or 3, just so it's clear that it's continuous. Because the timing is a new thing, I think. It's when you're watching somebody who's if you're deaf and watching somebody who's doing a skill that you don't have, my interpretation is that you're thinking it's like it's just got to be quick, you know? But there's not sometimes awareness that there has to be a time component involved when you say that. And so I would have all 6 of the stop sounds here, and I would actually make sure that, like we did, but, and then, sorry, I need to be able to see it. Okay. And then I would make sure that they're all in line. So that way I can show them that, oh, see, they look similar. That's a bad line, but so p, but all look similar on the lips. And then we would fill this whole thing in, and then I would slowly expose them to the glides. So, and I would start with if you could say ooh, and say these two sounds together, and then I'll insert the W for that. After they say it, and I say right in the middle of that was your W sound. And then of course the liquids. So, and then sometimes with these, I will also, because they take up time, I will add a second production. Like, so that's my way of getting at that written pronunciation. And then the last thing, and this, I would love to hear your opinion on this, Robin, because it's probably, what I'm doing is probably not accurate, but I'm like trying to do the best without, going through the Visi pitch and testing myself. So how long do we say consonant productions relatively? So this, sometimes I show them this starting off with short and quick, all the way to what would be considered long. So of course, in the middle, it's kind
I
of,
see.
it's kind of, it's hit or miss. But
Right.
yeah, and I think probably with the like the z would go before s actually, but that's fine. So
Yeah. The voice sounds, I guess, are slightly longer than the voiceless sounds
oh,
um simply because there's pre-voicing, and the voicing doesn't continue, the voicing
okay.
doesn't start until after the opening of
Mhm.
the lips for the
Just reversing
voiceless
the
sounds.
first second.
Is that for stops and continuous? Because maybe I have
Just the stops,
okay.
because I don't think, I think the continuance, the voicing starts at the in the same place.
Okay. Yeah, so I this might not be perfect, but it's something that I use
No,
and
but I think it makes sense.
Yeah,
um
there's a lot of neat stuff here.
so I think that was everything I had that I had wanted to show, and I know we're at one already, so
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
I had the
what I,
visit pitch question.
yes.
For do the rest of you know what the visit pitch is or was? I really miss it. Do you still have do you still have one, Jennifer?
Yes.
It
We
wound up,
have 5, I think.
yeah. We
Yeah.
had one at AU, and then it got so that our computers couldn't talk to it anymore. The more advanced our computers got, the less they could
We
converse with the visit pitch.
we have designated computers for it, I believe, because we need to, yeah, maintain that. I know, let me just show you one thing if that's okay.
Mhm.
yeah.
If you could explain what the visit pitch is to the people who don't know what it is.
Sure. It is a way of showing visual representations of the qualities of the sounds. So it's a spectrogram, so it's waveforms, and you would see like if you had, where did you all go? Hang on. If you had pa, for example, you would see that there's a line for the P, and then you would see no voicing for the P or that component. And then you would see voicing, which is another line going this way for the ah. And I
So what it shows is several different things. It can show you intonation. It can
Mhm.
show you the waveform, which is what you were describing. It can show you the formant the formant distribution, really two formants in real time. So if you wanted to go ew or something like that, you can see the movement. But my favorite thing was the vowel chart,
Yeah.
where if you did a steady state vowel, it would appear on the chart and it would try to identify what vowel you were using. And I've always wanted to have something that would combine the color vowel chart with that vowel chart aspect of the
Right.
visit pitch, so you could just you know speak E or eh into the
Mhm.
machine, and it would appear somewhere in the right box. And wouldn't that be an amazing way of getting feedback?
Absolutely. I think that's an app you should create.
Well, we've been trying to find somebody who can do that.
Oh.
I remember oh, it was several what was it, as long as 8 years ago? I don't know which it was, the Chicago T-cell convention, Karen, the international convention,
Mhm.
where we were trying to find somebody in the exhibitors, and we ran all over the exhibitors area looking for somebody who could do something like that, and we talked to several people and they weren't sure they could manage it. But
So this is happening right now. Yeah, that's neat.
This one you can't freeze frame or anything. The VisiPitch you can, but this, if I wanted to do you could see. You could also see the redness is the volume. I, I, so you could see sh,
oh,
some of.
that's nice. That helps with
Oh,
fricatives. Yeah,
that's
the
very
pitch also
nice.
has that. Yeah.
And then you're right, Prot is another option too. I get really confused with Prot.
I
It's
can't use
very
Prod.
useful.
It's too complicated for me.
Yeah, and there is an app, let me just see, Vowel Viz. Have you seen that before? I don't know if they
Oh,
support it. Vowel Viz is kind of like what you're talking about, where it's $50. Um, it is, let me see.
Valviz is, I know, this is a T-cell person who created
Okay.
Valviz.
So
And we
that one
actually,
is similar
yeah,
to what you're talking about, but not with Color Vowel.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, in theory, Blue Canoe could do something like this, except
We talked about it.
yeah.
But uh, there are all kinds of initiatives. So hey, this has been amazing. First of all, I want to do big kudos. I
It's
know
wonderful.
I can speak for everyone in the room
And
that we're
thank you
all
so much
paths.
for coming and explaining it to us.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
great to chat.
Yeah, and I can see follow up. I want to just say that when you think about the eyes and the ears, which are so much a part of language learning in many ways, um, I met several years ago a man who's from Egypt, a TESOL professional at a conference, and he discovered Color Vowel, and then he went home and he works with visually impaired and blind students, and he created the noisy color vowel chart. And because blind learners do not care about color. Right? There's nothing about a color word that means anything to them. So by not caring, that's kind of a shallow way to put it. It's not salient, not meaningful. Therefore, what do you do as the reward? There's a reward here by looking. Even if you're colorblind, there's a reward in the symbol, right? Or the concept of a reward. And so anyway, I'm going to track him down and we're going to find a time to hear from him because he showed it to me at one point. It was fascinating along those lines. So
Does he
I
use
decided
the
now.
names of sounds? What does he use instead of colors?
Oh, essentially I remember there was, it's maybe he's improved the anchor phrase, but there was the violent lion. And then you'd touch it on the PowerPoint. He created all the audios. So you'd get to violent lion. It was rawr. So that was the sensory
I
reward for violent lion, which has the flood of I in it. But essentially it's the arbitrary reward, the same way the color is arbitrary reward for the flood within the anchor phrase. So kind of just fascinating to think about. And that touches on that question I interrupted myself on, which was just,
assonance.
yeah, assonance. Like if vowel sound is not salient to a learner of yours, um, I guess I don't know quite what my question is. It's hard to get them to, do you say things to them to help them understand how important the vowel sound is to being understood when they speak? Do you have to build that somehow in a way that's maybe more challenging than it is for us?
Right. I know there are times where I've used the timing feature, or I also have something else that I share with them, like on the screen I will have a large circle and a small circle for the vowel syllables, the syllable features, but then also
Stress, you mean?
stress. Yes, thank
Yeah.
you. Sorry. And I will also show them through timing, like the O has to be long, the N has to be long, the T is short,
Right. Because you're
it
thinking about length, not just in the vowel, but these
right.
features we don't think as much about for consonant production.
And yeah, it's can be a tough thing to convey, but that's yeah, when I use my written pronunciation and my other tools, I try to reach them as best as possible.
Okay.
So
All right. Well, we will say goodbye, but I do hope to keep in touch and maybe have another session. I think the fact that when I asked you a little bit about how much you have a community to share with, it sounds like maybe there are other folks doing similar work, but siloed. Do you think that's probably true?
I think that's probably true, yeah.
And that just says to me that there's room for a little bit of connection and community. Maybe we need a follow-up session with more folks from the speech language world coming together with us. Ooh. Hey, thank you
Thank
so
you so
much
much.
for
This
your
is wonderful.
time,
Thank
your
you.
insights, your expertise. We're
Thank you
just
so
thrilled to
much.
have you, Jennifer. You have a great day. Everybody, thank you for being here. If you're watching, join us sometime for a Fridays at, join our teachers community. You will find all of that information at colorvowel.com on who we help teachers. Go to that page and we'll get you started. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.
Thank you.